Hi, Kelly.
Hi,
How are you?
I am pretty good. It's Friday and it's beautiful outside, so pretty good. How are you?
I know it is really nice outside.
Hmm.
I've been in this room for the whole week, and now I stepped outside this afternoon and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to
Right.
remember that this exists. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have this conversation with you. Um, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you so that everybody knows who you are, and then we will go from there. All right. So, my name is Amanda Villavesas, and I am the director at Mental Health Lou. And I'm joined today by Kelly Weaver from Girls Rock Louisville. And Kelly is a social worker and an educator. They've worked with Girls Rock Louisville in a few roles over the past 3 years. She's currently the workshop coordinator and loves helping create and facilitating programming. They also teach introductory women's gender and sexuality studies at U of L, and have recently been hired as the domestic violence and human trafficking case manager at Catholic Charities of Louisville. They have 3 sweet fur babies and love embroidering. Fur babies are fabulous. And you clearly do love your fur babies, because every profile I've seen of yours includes fur babies.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you're
they're everywhere.
obviously, yeah, you're obviously a fan.
Yeah, at some point during this, I am confident that one of my babies will jump on the desk and run right in front of me because they like
Oh,
getting
of course.
it.
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. I know whenever I do counseling with people who have pets, especially cats, there's always this part where the cat comes and just crosses the screen and sometimes just sits right on them and stuff, and it's just sweet. So, well, thank you. Enough about fur babies though. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to start this conversation and kind of talk a little bit about how, because today's our music day. So talking about how music can help the community. I know you all just did this really cool series about music, so we'll be sure to talk about that. But first, before we begin, I want to know a little bit about just the girls rock movement in general. How did it get started? How has it grown? Give us a little background for people who maybe aren't familiar.
Yeah, so the so the Girls Rock Alliance, which is the international collection of all of the various girls rock camps and organizations, all started in 2001 in Portland, Oregon. There was like a little girls rock and roll camp, and so it really started there. Partially in response to some of the feminism and activism of the 90s, like the Riot Girl movement, stuff like that, spaces that were meant for girls to be loud, to express themselves, maybe in ways that weren't always socially acceptable. And so it really started as that safe space for girls and women to work together and collaborate. Girls Rock is and was an intergenerational movement. And so, you have women guiding girls. So that was kind of like the initial thought for Girls Rock. It then, after the initial camp in Portland, there started being camps in Sweden, all over the United States. And now there are hundreds of camps around the world that all function a little bit differently. There's definitely some independence in the camps. We don't all have like singular objectives or whatever. And that is serendipity. And so, anyways, so yeah, so there are maybe lose my train of thought.
Yeah.
So anyways, Girls Rock Louisville, our chapter, has been around for I think 5 or 6 years. It started at the Outskirts Festival, and so it started out just being kind of like a moment to appreciate women and femmes in music, and then became a camp. And so our camp, Girls Rock Louisville, or GRL, some of us just refer to it as GRL, we of course embrace the values of the Girls Rock Alliance, which is to empower girls, to provide space, to promote self-esteem, collaboration, independence, all kinds of really cool stuff. And then
Mhm.
our camps specifically also focuses on things like activism, boundaries, self-care, mental health, and things like that. So it's really just like a big movement about collaboration and music being a tool to sort of express yourself and learn more about yourself.
Awesome. And to ask the question that I know you probably get asked a million times is, is it really only for girls? I think the chapter here in Louisville is a little bit more inclusive. So maybe you can explain, like you've told me, each chapter is a little different. So how does the chapter in Louisville work when it comes to that?
Yeah, so that is definitely one of the differences among some camps. So some camps are a space that is just for girls, and then ours is not. So our space includes all mages, and mage is a shortening of the term marginalized genders. And so that refers to girls, both cis and trans youth of all identities, and gender nonconforming youth. So essentially, mages are everybody but cis boys. So boys who are identified as boys at birth, and we're like, yeah, that's right, when they get older. So and we of course understand that like all youth need to have really powerful spaces, but it's important for us to focus on mages, especially in terms of the volunteers that we have, mostly the volunteers we have and the youth that we serve, because we try to serve those whose voices are not always respected, are not always uplifted, and are not always given that space, figuratively and literally, to be themselves. And so for us, our space is open to those of a variety of genders, and most of our volunteers are mages. We do have a few roles that cis men can participate in, and we very much appreciate our cis men allies. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we come from with that.
Cool. Yeah, no, I like that. And I think, I completely, you had that piece there, like every group, every kid deserves to have something. However, this is what you're serving. This is the population you're serving. So, and that's, completely fine. And I think you serve a population that really, like you said, is very underserved and could, benefit from all the fabulous like pieces of what you bring. So
yeah, and we
appreciate
also
that.
had some programming over the last, because obviously our stuff's all digital right now because it's a pandemic, but we have had a variety of workshops posted online, stuff like that, and that stuff anybody can take advantage of, right? Like we posted workshops about things like boundaries and feminism and stuff like that, so anyone could get on our social media and look at some of the stuff we put. It's just that whenever we have an actual space, whether that's a Google Classroom or a classroom in person, we just try to make that a space to where people feel the most comfortable. So yeah.
Well, and tell us a little bit about, the camps, like, so you just said, like, maybe you do some like more virtual things at the moment, but when we're in person, you have these great camps. So tell us a little bit about the camps.
So the camp is the best week of the year. Literally any volunteer from Girls Rock Louisville will tell you that. It is a very sacred time and space. And it is a week long. And the way that functions is that our campers apply beforehand. We organize them into bands. And then whenever they show up, many of them without music experience, we have been around long enough that we have several returning campers who are like, yeah, I got it. But we also still every year have people who don't have any music experience, and GRL is made to be that way. You can show up and be like, I'm going to learn the guitar this week. And so through that week, the week is split. Each day is split. It's like a Monday through Friday week. And each week in the mornings, there is instrument practice and workshops. And the workshops are around everything from feminism, self-care, activism, history of music, all the way to creating music engineering, screen printing. Campers make their own t-shirts and flyers. And so it's really a whole bunch of stuff. And then in the afternoons, they practice with their bands. And so by the end of the week, they have either learned an instrument or learned how vocals work, and they have, created a name for their band and have created an entire song start to finish, with really just some support and guidance from the adults that are there. It's mostly the campers who do it. And then at the end of the week, we have a really great concert, and all of their music is put onto an album that Saturday at La La Land Studio. And yeah, and it's just like an amazing time, start to finish.
It's like a band boot camp where it's like, this is how you
Yeah.
make flyers, this is how you make t-shirts, get out there, here's how to
Yeah,
play an instrument.
it's a lot of energy and movement. And I remember the first time that I was at camp as a regular, just like camp counselor volunteer. You just sort of follow the campers around, see if there's anything that needs to happen. You help participate with them, make sure there's no crisis or anything like that, and keep an eye on everybody. And so, yeah, it was a whirlwind. And by the end, it's such a magical experience. Yeah, and we usually have a variety of spaces. Can you go to your things, but let's say you're someone that a lot of noise can be a lot or overwhelming for you sometimes, and you're like, I don't think I can handle being around all this noise all week. Well, you don't have to be like that all week. We have a self-care space where you can go have some quiet time and not have to be overstimulated. And we really respect that people from a variety of places and all have different things that make us comfortable and uncomfortable. So it's definitely a space that allows for people to make those decisions while they're there. It's not just like, you know, like the kids who are comfortable automatically.
Oops, we froze for a second.
Like some of us aren't automatically like, woo, like really loud.
Right. It's not necessarily a camp for only extroverts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so tell us in what ways you've seen the campers grow in that week, because that sounds like an amazing week, an exciting week, an intense week, maybe a week where you really are like, if somebody was like, hey, Amanda, you're going to get on stage and play an instrument you've never played before, I'd be like, nah, it's not going to happen. I'm not doing that. I'll dance in a circle, but I'm definitely not doing that.
Yeah, definitely. So honestly, I have seen campers grow in every way. So we have campers who have to learn to take a step back and let others talk for a bit. We have campers who learn to speak more and be loud. You know, you might have some that seem kind of quiet at first, and at the end of the week, they want to like scream into a mic. And then there's also the growth as far as like what skills the campers have. So I mentioned that we have like music engineering and things like that. So some of our campers can learn how to take care of their instruments, how to create things. And sometimes it shows people things that maybe you didn't know you were good at, you know? You had mentioned in my little intro that I love embroidery. I started that this year. I just bought a little kit and was like, maybe I'll be good at embroidery, you know, even though I don't know how to sew. And so sometimes it's just sometimes it's just giving yourself time to try something. And that's really what GRL is about, is letting you try those things. So it really, I feel like, challenges sometimes the perceptions campers have of themselves, who they think they are and what they think they're capable of. You see them grow in terms of collaboration. There are certainly times where people butt heads, right? Sometimes people don't agree. Sometimes things are said and people get upset, and you know, your relationships are tested. But we really support them through that, and then they also learning to accept mistakes in the creative process. So we have something that we do throughout camp where if someone, let's say I was making something and I messed up, and I was like, oh, I suck at this. If there's a volunteer around, they're going to interrupt or say afterwards, you rock. And so by the end of the week, it challenges, even though it's like corny, it's like, it's fine. It really challenges the campers whenever they're being critical of themselves out loud to pause that thought and then replace it with saying that they rock. And really just accepting that sometimes things aren't going to turn out the way that we thought, and being able to just go with it. Even mistakes during performances and you have to keep singing, right? So stuff like that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I love that idea of like just saying, you know, you rock is like a softening, because it is kind of silly. So you probably start to, you know, you're kind of like, oh, okay, you know, just kind of laugh it off a little bit and soften around some of those negative words, especially that we see, you know, as you're talking about marginalized youth, and we know in young women, especially, we really do, especially in that like middle school to high school age, where you kind of come out of that bubble of elementary school where everything, you know, not everybody's experience, but for many people, the experience is like, oh, sweet and lovely, and I'm just a kid, you know, and then you kind of get hit with middle school and high school, and that negative self-talk really does start to grow. And so it's cool that you all work and help people, you know, like learn how to make mistakes, because that you're going to make a mistake every day of your life for the rest of your life is just going to happen.
Exactly. So. Yeah, and sometimes that's part of it. Like, and if you're creating something artistic, music or physical art or things like that, sometimes mistakes aren't mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Bob Ross says, they're happy accidents. So,
Yes, exactly.
yeah, so I feel like we really challenge our campers and ourselves to feel that way, because that's another thing about being in that space is, as an adult, it really challenges you to grow too, because you're also taking in all of those lessons, even if it's just being like absorbed into your body. And by the end, you're like, man, awesome. I'm like really great, right? So yeah, it's a good space for all of us to remember to be more kind to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And so would you say that's why a lot of people, like the campers, are originally even drawn to GRL, would be the the inclusiveness and the positivity and the opportunity to learn something new, and I mean, I think there's so many reasons to really attend besides the fact that it's just cool. But
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely hope that that's part of it. And I do think that that is part of it, is that there is the perception that, GRL is a really fun and powerful space, which is very true. And then sometimes it's that youth meet us out and about and realize this might be something for them. So like when it's not a pandemic, we usually have something called an instrument petting zoo throughout the year. And so we'll go to different like pop-up events, and we'll just bring like ukuleles. Those are usually a fun one, or like other instruments. And we're like, just pick it up, just do the thing, make some sound, and just like see what it feels like in your. And so sometimes we end up running into future campers that way, and they're like, could I learn how to do this maybe? And you're like, of course you could. So, and then other times it's that they're siblings, they know someone else who's already been through it. And then other times it's that they just have an interest in music and want to see if they can make music.
Mm-hmm. Well, and talking from like the mental health angle, we've talked a little bit today earlier, and talks about how mental health or music is helpful for mental health. And have you seen that with your campers?
Yes. So everything from the physical act of doing music sometimes, especially if you're playing an instrument, that physical activity is helpful for our bodies and brains. Making music can be really
Oops,
helpful.
sorry.
Oh, you're totally fine. For a second, I thought it was me.
No, sorry, my screen my screen just went away.
Yeah, and then the other thing too, just like making music, sometimes that's a space for you to be able to say things that you really want to say, and that's usually the very like the center of the music that the campers make. It usually expresses the values that they feel and the things they're experiencing, whether it's them talking about the environment, them talking about the way other people talk to them, or all kinds of things. And so really, usually the campers in their bands will talk about some of the things that really matter to them, and then they infuse that into their music. So they get to express some of their individual emotions, and then they also get to create music that talks about the things that matter to them. That's why we connect to music sometimes, right? And a lot of times is that we feel something in that. We feel something from someone else that we also feel. And so you get to like have relating to somebody, of hearing your experience, really feeling like and understood. And so I think that music can be a really cool way of trying to do that, whether it's writing lyrics or making sounds. Sometimes that can be a place for you to really exercise the way that you feel. And then also sometimes it can just be cathartic, right? Like I had mentioned, some of our campers by the end of the week, they want to scream, like they want to be really loud. And so that can be really powerful, especially, you had talked about as you get older, especially youth of marginalized gender sometimes feel like they have to be more critical, sometimes feel like they have to be more quiet. And so giving youth a space where they can just like scream and be super loud is amazing, because a lot of times kids and youth are told to be quiet or their words aren't respected. And that's not how it is at Girls Rock. And then one other thing I was going to say too, I knew I would get lost in my thoughts, so I've got my little note cards for each section. The other thing too is the way that our brains respond to repetitive things too. So music can be part of our healing, just like our favorite movie can. I'm sure many of us can think of an album or a song that if we listen to, we start to calm down. And it's because our brain is entering into that familiar space, and your brain gets to calm down a little bit. And so, yeah, music is definitely a big piece of healing for a lot of people.
Mhm. Well, and to go even a little further into that, I know prior to this, when we met to talk about this, we both talked about sort of like how in our city right now, we see a lot of young people who are dealing with some maybe form of trauma, whether it's related to life previous to this year, where maybe it's like historical, like racial trauma, maybe it's related more to, just growing up in this country, maybe it's related to COVID. There's a lot of different degrees of trauma that people have experienced. And you've mentioned how music can be a helpful coping mechanism in that way as well. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah. So I think one thing that I think of whenever we talk about this is the way that we can see artists who have big platforms now using their music to express how they feel. Sometimes some of the distress around trauma that happens around us is that we can't always like express like how that's making us feel or really respond to it in any way where we feel like we're heard. And we've seen many examples this year of artists who have used their music to really talk about important things, whether it's the Chicks' new album talking about Gaslighter and marching, or if it's, Meg Thee Stallion's recent performance on SNL talking about how she feels about the Breonna Taylor case. Artists, we can see how they're using their music to express the values that they have and to respond to violence that happens around us. And so music can be used in that way. It can also just be one of our coping mechanisms or something that helps us ground. So grounding brings us back in the present from that moment of anxiety and fear. And music can be a big part of that. Like if you have spent all day, taking in all of this information and stuff, maybe you just need to turn on some just quiet music and just sit for a second. And so I think that music can help like transport us to a different space and to a different feeling, give us a break, or it can be a tool to like really dig into how we're feeling. And in terms of trauma, we not only experience trauma ourselves, something directly happening to us, but we experience something called secondary trauma, where it's the trauma we feel when someone we care about has been really hurt. And then we have the trauma called insidious trauma, which is also kind of like a community trauma, which could be like some of the examples you gave, like historical and current racial trauma, rape culture, things like that. So gentrification, things like that. And so we have all of these different kinds of trauma that we get impacted by. This has been a very traumatic year, and not to say that years before have not also been traumatic, but there's a whole pandemic this year too. So
this is the year that keeps on giving.
It really though, and it's just like, okay, it's October. Come on, Christmas, get here. But yeah, so I think that music can really just help us like take care of our sometimes. And then, maybe if we want to respond to some of these things that are bothering us, we can use music to do that. No Justice, No Peace, which has had a big presence downtown, has also, we had talked about before, has a choir where they've made a song that kind of expresses how they feel. And they had talked about at an event a few weeks ago, one of the people in the choir was like, for some of us, this is like our activism, or this is one piece of our activism. Not that you have to have just like one thing. But for some of us, our role is to be an artist. And so music can be part of that.
Well, and I like what you said about grounding too, because I was going to ask, what about people who don't maybe have an instrument at home, or of course everybody has something, right? Even if it's a table. But as you mentioned grounding, it made me think too of in therapy, sometimes we'll have people tap on their legs. And when they're tapping on their legs, it's helping them regulate their system and calm down. But you could be tapping a rhythm, you could be tapping a beat, just trying to help yourself kind of like ground and calm down. And next thing you know, that could turn into a song itself. Just keep going, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think so people at home who don't have instruments, what ways do you encourage them? Like I said, you probably don't need an instrument really to kind of have music in your life, but are there specific, maybe like whether it's grabbing, something from, grabbing a bowl or a pot and pan, or is it or using your chest, or an app, or what kind of things do you recommend for people to kind of keep going when they're at home?
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, a couple things. You had mentioned, I feel like you said an app a second ago.
Mhm.
There's an app called that's why I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. Soundtrap Studio. And
Mhm.
yeah, and it's an app where you can go on and you can make music. Our campers used, I think, two different apps during like the digital camp that we had like a month or two ago. Time, and
Mhm.
so a while back, and so yeah, you can utilize free apps where you can make music and that way. You can also, get on Spotify and make a playlist of music that's really calming for you. Like I said earlier, that repetitive, having a coping mechanism that feels repetitive is really good for your brain. And
Mhm.
then other things you can do, you can Google DIY instruments, do it yourself instruments, where you can create things from things that you have at home. And then I absolutely love that you mentioned the patting on the leg, because that's something that I also do as a coping mechanism.
Mhm.
So yeah, for sure, being able to like stimulate your body a little bit, and move your body a little bit. And then the other thing too is maybe it's just that you want to like sing along to a song, So I have a couple of songs where if I start my day and I'm like really not feeling it, I'll turn that song on in my car on my way to work, and then I sing the whole thing start to finish, and it never fails to help like lift some of that heaviness on my chest, even if it's just a little
Mhm.
bit, and then I can kind of ease myself into the day.
Mhm.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, you can have your really loud music where you're like, okay, I need to like get this out. Okay, well then like put your earphones in and turn on a really loud sound and just like move, just move your body.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would suggest to think about, for people wondering that, to think about what kinds of things they need for that catharsis to feel better. Do they need to feel loud? Do they need to have softness? Do they need to move their body? What kinds of things are going to make
Mhm.
your body feel better? And to try that out, and then to figure out if there's a way you can incorporate music into that. One other way you can incorporate music too are guided meditation affirmations.
Mhm.
So you can have also online for on YouTube, stuff like that, music, and you can say some of those affirmations and have sort of like a meditative state. So music can really be used
Mhm.
for that whole spectrum of emotions that you're feeling.
Exactly. And also it's, I think as you mentioned with the choir, you know, one person singing is great. Notice though how that also becomes an entire community experience, or at least a group of people getting together. So music is also fabulous at connecting us, right? So if you are processing something, maybe your bandmates are processing something too, it's a good opportunity to come together. And even if you're just playing together over Zoom or FaceTime or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, like our youth in the digital camp that we had, they never saw each other in person, but they still made really cool songs together, just by being together in Google Classroom. So yeah, you can do that through Zoom, you can do that through GoToMeeting, you could FaceTime a friend, you can do all kinds of things. And so yeah, but it's really just like all about thinking about like what kind of space do you need to have, and then trying to
Mhm.
figure out what that's going to look like for you, because self-care really looks different for all of us, as do like boundaries that we hold with ourselves and others. It's really about reflecting with ourselves and what we're feeling and what we might need to feel better in that moment. um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and notice, or let's also talk, because I think in a sense we're talking about coping and healing, but also if you're in a good space, music's great for that as well, right?
Yeah.
Music's good for positive feelings too,
Hmm.
which you probably see at camp a lot.
Yeah, it can definitely be a way that you can express your joy, and it can be something you come back to. If you create something out of joy and listen to it later, I feel like that would be a really beautiful experience.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And have you seen maybe campers hesitant initially to like really share that joy, and then they do, or sometimes I think some of us are a little more quiet about our positivity. And then as you like say, if you're playing music or something and you're really getting into it, or like it's something you made and you're really starting to get into it, maybe you suddenly express it in a much bigger way than you've ever normally expressed it. Maybe you're more of a quiet kid or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if I've necessarily seen that at camp. I'll also say that I'm not usually one of the people who's present during the band
Mm.
practices because I'm usually the one running around checking on like workshops and stuff.
Mhm.
But I will say that in spaces I've been in with youth who have been creating various things, I do think there is a hesitation sometimes to express things that make you happy, you know, like whether it's just sharing something cool about your day and then being like, oh, never mind, I'm just rambling, whatever. I do think that there can be that tendency when you're sharing something sweet or joyful or
Mhm.
just something that's just good just for you, you can sometimes feel like, do people even want to hear this? Like, you know, and so there can be that kind of like negative self-talk that like discourages us from sharing joy. So, and I do feel like the music that's made at Girls Rock has like a really nice balance with, you know, expressing themselves and like what different kinds of emotions they're expressing.
Mhm.
There have been some pretty joyful songs that have been created, and I've loved hearing it. But then there are others that sound a little more, you know, more of like a melancholy to them, and then some that are like, yeah, you know. So,
Right.
yeah, I feel like we really do challenge them.
Darn it, I think we froze.
Oh, sorry, it like froze
Oh,
for a second.
there we go. Okay, I was gonna say we froze for a second, but we're good. We're all back. Okay. Um, yeah, so you're saying that like that's a great yeah, it's a great opportunity to kind of like take that joy and like grow that joy. I like all the different variations too of what that joy might look like.
Yeah, and you can listen to music that's been made this year and past years. That we had like a virtual listening party. I feel like it was called something different, but anyways, it's
Yeah.
so we had like a cute little virtual thing where we listened to the music that was created, and Jay, our executive director, talked with some of the campers who were present about like their thoughts about camp, about making the music and stuff like that. So that's still on our social media, and
Mhm.
And then you can also go on SoundCloud and look at our past albums. And it is really fun to look at what the campers have made because, like, there's some really great songs. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, they're really great. And some of them can be very like wholesome, which is nice.
Right. Yeah. Well, and let's talk a little bit about how, you've seen people grow through music. Like how does music help you maybe set boundaries or learn self-care, manage anxiety, things like that?
Yeah, we definitely talk about boundaries at camp because like we had talked about earlier, with like some kids who it's much more natural for them to be very like loud and extroverted and expressive, and for some it's not so natural for them to do that. And so yeah, we do talk about boundaries, and we encourage our youth to hold boundaries with each other because whether it's some campers want to run up and hug their friends when they get there, others don't want any physical contact, things like that. So I think that camp has been a good space of the campers being able to recognize the boundaries of those around them and things that make them comfortable or not comfortable,
Mhm.
whether it's their body or like things to talk about. And then I think that there's also space to sort of safely challenge our boundaries because sometimes our boundaries change a little bit or they fluctuate, and sometimes we reassess them. And so, but we always want to do that in a safe way, right? Because things can
Mhm.
be challenging, but they should still be safe. And so, I think that some of our campers might be a little more closed off whenever the week starts, but by the end are much less so and are more comfortable maybe sharing more of themselves.
Mhm.
And then in terms of self-care, we really encourage everyone at camp space to take care of themselves when needed. So there's a separate self-care space that's also for the adults, for the volunteers,
Mhm.
for us to go and drink coffee or eat a snack and just like have a little moment of Zen.
Yeah.
We have folks at Girls Rock that, you know, will especially put time into helping people with sort of managing different mental health concerns throughout the week and taking care of themselves. And yeah, I think the thing about Girls Rock is that we recognize there are going to be moments where you're going to feel anxious,
Mhm.
and so we never force anyone to do anything they're not comfortable with. So, like, you know, if we're doing like a workshop, for instance, and someone asks for someone maybe to like do something as like an example, no one's going to be told like you have to get up and do this. It's all about like making those choices if you're comfortable, and I think that can be helpful because I know for like, for younger, I was not extroverted. I was very introverted.
Mhm.
I did what I refer to as like forced fun. Like, it's your idea of fun, so you're trying to force me to play this game that's making me so anxious. But that's not like what this space is like. And so I think that that safe space allows for campers to really challenge themselves a little bit. Um, yeah, because we also recognize that like that makes them anxious, like the for sure makes many of them anxious. And so volunteers leading up to the showcase help them work through that. We usually have a workshop that's specifically on like stage presence and that kind of thing, and we have performers who come in and talk to them about like, hey, like, how do I do this? We also have, we usually do like karaoke stuff at
Mhm.
lunch. We'll try to make space for that. And so we just give them a chance to just get up there in front of people that they trust, to, you know, just make noise, you know.
Mhm.
And I think it really helps them see that anxiety, like recognize it, but then be able to like move past it and that not be as much of
Mhm.
like a roadblock.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of good exposure in a supportive environment. How do you, for the campers, when you talk about self-care, you know, and maybe just for kids in general who, you know, aren't campers, but maybe are playing music or, you know, how do you help them or talk with them about that self-awareness of being able to check in with themselves to know I need a moment for me, or I need to set a boundary, or, you know, how, so, what kind of things do you do to help them become aware of that moment when they're like, oh, I really need to set a boundary, or I need to go step aside for a moment?
Yeah, so one of the ways we do that is we usually have a workshop that's specifically about boundaries. That's usually the one that I give about boundaries and body autonomy. And so through that, usually what I would do in that workshop is I go through different examples of setting boundaries and what that can look like. And
Mhm.
then we talk about all the different kinds of boundaries. So like, for instance, I have boundaries that are going to be about my body. You know, who can be near my body, who do I want to give a hug to, things like that. Those are obviously very different this year because it's a pandemic, so there's that added layer. And then our emotional boundaries, and things like that. And then there's also like situational boundaries, you know, what situations are comfortable with you, what aren't. And then we practice setting boundaries. And so we in the past have made like little lists of like what are some of my boundaries, and so we have them practice doing that. And then throughout the week we have moments of sort of like meditative space. So we usually have
Mhm.
someone who comes in and does yoga or something like that, and we try to like show them different ways you can take care of themselves, and then encourage them to, if they're starting to feel some kind of way, or if we notice them maybe feeling that way, like with their body language being like, hey, do you maybe want to go sit in, you know, the
Mhm.
room over there, or do this or do that? Do you want to go get a snack? Do you need to go to the bathroom? Just like reminding them, like, it's okay to like get up and go do that thing that you need. And then I think the other piece of it is just doing it by example. Them seeing
Yeah.
volunteers going and taking time for themselves, encouraging other campers to do it. So I think it's about giving them examples of what it can look like to set boundaries, and then like showing them what that can look like.
Right. So even if we took the music part out of this, you know, that those are kind of rules for life, whether you're a caregiver of some kind, parent, teacher, etc., of, you know, an adult in a child's life, showing them that you practice your own self-regulation, and then that's going to help them see, you know, how you take care of yourself, how you calm yourself down or relax or whatever it is that you need. And then they'll learn from observing. I also like the idea too of being able to think about boundaries, because I think a lot of children aren't necessarily taught that idea of boundaries so much. You know, everybody's told like, or a lot of people are taught, you know, you have to share, da 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 da, you know, be sure to give your grandparents a hug and a kiss, all that kind of stuff. And some kids are very uncomfortable with that, or some kids that isn't, that's where their boundary lies. And so encouraging children that they have the right to set some of those boundaries, or especially around their body, their emotional and like mental health boundaries, and how to ask for people, or ask that people respect those boundaries, or at least let people know like, oh, I'm not a hugger, or something like that. Yeah. So anybody
Yeah, and
can make
that's
that list.
definitely yeah, exactly. And that's why it is really important for us to always have, regardless of the other, because like our workshops every year fluctuate. It just depends on like, you know, what ends up being offered, and like, you know, who we end up talking to and who has like the time and the space to do different kinds of workshops. So there's a big variation on what that can look like. But at least since I've been there, and like, you know, so like from what I have seen, every year there's that space for boundaries being in some workshop there in some way, because like you said, that's not something that is taught to a lot of people, and so it's really important for us to do that, because we want them to have lots of skills like that, like you said, aren't necessarily attached to music, but are just like life skills that we need to have. And one of those is, and I totally agree that unfortunately the experience of youth and of childhood can sometimes be one that makes us feel like we don't have any agency. And so we really try to show the campers in a few different ways that they do have agency. And one way we try to show them that is by really letting them take a lot of lead in the camp space, by showing them that we value the thoughts that they have and the feelings that they have and the experiences because it's about them, like camp's about them. And so I think that, at least from what I've seen, I feel like that's what they get from camp, is that is a space that's for them. Because sometimes us adults, we have to like remind ourselves what it was like to be in youth, right? And having much of your time be controlled. And having the things, you know, what you can eat, what you can wear, who's around you, like you said, if you have to give someone a hug and like things like that. And not all of us are in spaces when we're younger where we get to learn those things. And those things can be compounded by parts of our identity, like our gender or race or ability and things like that, where people feel like that it's okay for them to comment on certain things or touch us or things like that. And with us focusing especially on caring for mages, it's really important for us to show them those boundaries, so that they can feel like, so they can learn what that agency is like.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. I think that's really cool that you all do that, and that you're so thoughtful about everything you do, you know, because it sounds like you're giving such a rare experience. When I think of camp, a lot of times I think of a very well coordinated, you know, like you said, time managed day that's probably still really fun, but it's kind of more of the same in that sense of, okay, guys, we are going here at this time. Everybody in this group, line up, let's go, you know, and instead of giving the kids a little bit more of that agency and ability to say, you know, like, I need a timeout, I need to go to the self-care corner.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because at any point during the day, if they feel like they need to step out, they're encouraged to do that. And they also usually, unless there's a specific day where maybe because of availability, there was only like one morning workshop, but usually there are 2 morning workshops offered, so that they do get to have that choice. Because, you know, obviously there's a level of structure, because like otherwise we'd be running wild for 8 hours.
Right.
Are times where we're like, all right, we have like 10 minutes to get from like this space to this space. Let's try to like make our way there. But we try to offer moments where they're there are those choices, like maybe you want to, go to the workshop that's about the history of comics, or maybe you don't care about that. So instead you want to go like make a flyer. And so we try to give them different opportunities to pick things that are interesting for them. And then we also too, we ask the campers, like for instance, the camper application from a couple of months ago for the digital camp, we asked them, like, are there specific things that you might want to learn more about? And we really value that. And if we notice that campers aren't really feeling a workshop, the workshop's not going to happen again, because like we've talked about, that space is for them. And so if that's not a space that they're enjoying, then we're not going to do that. So we really, we try to offer lots of moments for feedback from the campers, and we really respect their feedback. It's very important to us.
Awesome. Well, I want to get to, because I know you worked on, you did a series, right? For and I want to get to that, but real quick before we get there, anybody who maybe is at home thinking about picking up an instrument, but maybe they don't have access to it, or they don't know how to play it. I know you mentioned a few things earlier. Any additional pieces to that, or ideas, or maybe should they just go to your Instagram page and scroll back through and do some of the lessons?
That is one great way of doing it, because the videos from our Rock the Internet series, that was like the very beginning of the summer, I want to say it was in April. Again, time has just
it was partly in May, because we definitely boosted you all for Mental Health Month. We included you all in Mental Health Month. Yeah.
Great. And so during the Rock the Internet series, there were recorded, little sessions where you could learn some basics. And so I would definitely encourage people, go all through our social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, check everything out. Look for those moments that we have here and there where we offer times for us to come together. I would encourage them to look around their house and see if there's anything interesting to them, and look up like the DIY instruments and things like that. Maybe download an app if they're curious, and just like see if any of that's interesting to you. And if it's really interesting, maybe talk to your caregivers about that, and be like, hey, I think this music thing might be something that I'm interested in. Because I will say, Girls Rock, GRL, there is a cost to attend the camp, but we have made it our goal. I think it was this year and last year, I'm trying to remember, but we value offering scholarships to our campers, and really try to have at least like 50% of campers who are there through scholarship. And we do that through our really amazing fundraising, and through really amazing caregivers who will pay a little bit higher to help cover that. And so, just seeing like if any of those things are fun for you, and then trying to see if you can work that into your life.
Right. Especially if you're at home right now and you're kind of looking for something to do. Music's a really cool way to use your time. As we wrap up though, like I said, I want to make sure we have enough time for you to tell us about this series that you all did. So, and where people can find it, and a little bit more about just the series in general.
Yeah, so I helped put together and record a series about harm and healing a couple of months ago. And we have started releasing it on our social media. Session 1, it's broken into parts because of, Instagram and stuff. It is a 4-part series on different kinds of harms and healing. And so session 1, installment 1 is about individual harm and healing, which meaning either I have done harm and I want to know what to do from there, or I have been harmed and I want to know what to do. So the first one's focused on that individual aspect, and that's the one that is available. And each one was done with different really cool people in our community who are involved in healing work in some way. And then the second session is about secondary harm and healing. Like I talked about earlier, someone we care about has been hurt, and what do we do about that? And then the third one is about that insidious or kind of community-based harms, and what different people in our community are doing to respond to that. And then the final one was sort of more of a reflective time to talk about what we view as necessary steps or components of having healthy communities in general, and what that can look like. And so that series was really put together because us at GRL had been talking about different things that are going on in the community, and had heard from some of our campers that there was just like so much to process. And so we wanted to offer that space to ask some of those questions, to hear from different experts in our community and what they have to say about it, so that our campers past from, you know, several camps, and just their general people who follow us, could benefit from that information. And so it's being released on Wednesdays, not quite every Wednesday, because again, there's a lot going on. And so we're releasing that whenever we can, whenever it's a good Wednesday for it. And so, like I said, part 1 and 2 of installment 1 are available, and keep an eye out on our social media for the later ones. And then you can also look, like I had said, at past things that we've done, like our little listening party that we had, stuff like that. And then as far as upcoming things, we also have something in the past had been called Ladies Rock Camp, which is for mages who are 21 and up, who want to do the same thing that's at our youth camp, right? And so, which has been really fun in the past, and we're doing it again. This time it's going to be called Oxpro, and the applications for that will open October 12th. So if you're watching this and you're 21 or older and you're like, maybe I want to learn an instrument, maybe I want to be in a band, well, do it. It's going to be all virtual and you can do it. And then the camp itself is going to be the week of November 16th through the 21st, so the week before Thanksgiving week. And by the end, even if you're a beginner, you will have produced your own song. So yeah, so that's some of the stuff that we have going on right now. That, and just boosting other things that are going on. We've also been sharing different mental health resources, especially for those who have been involved in some of the protests and things like that in our community. There are specific mental health resources that are available for folks who have been protesting. And so we've really been trying to boost some of those things that are happening, which obviously affect our campers and our volunteers.
Yes, yeah, and I think your group is an awesome example of how, you know, like you're not a band, but music in general. It'd be cool if you guys were a band. But how music in general, though, you know, it doesn't have to just be love songs, or, you know, just writing music. It can be advocacy. It can be so much more, right? It can be the processing of, you know, your like mental health issues or trauma issues, healing. It can create this community. Like, I think you all are like really exemplify that, and especially here in Louisville, because I know you're very well, like you're in everything. You're connected to a lot of people, and I think that's great. I think that's really important. It's also very Louisville to be connected to everything and everyone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it really speaks to the wide range of folks that we have involved with GRL. We have so many artists and activists, which obviously there's a lot of overlap there, that are involved with GRL, whether it's you're a volunteer sometimes, or you're on our board, or things like that. Like we have such a solid base of really amazing people who care about the community, who care about our campers, who care about all the youth in Louisville. And so, yeah, I think that the things that we have done in the past and will continue to do really speak to just the amazing people who have been involved with Girls Rock and continue to be involved.
And for people who are watching this, can you tell them your like social media, you know, where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just look Girls Rock Louisville on Instagram and Facebook. Let me look real fast and see if our little thing on Instagram is something different than just Girls Rock Louisville. I think that's all it is. But I'm going to double check fast because I don't want to say that. Yeah. So, yeah, if you type in Girls Rock Louisville in Instagram, you'll get this cute little page here that has different stuff. You can go to our live TV or the Instagram live, and you'll see some fun stuff there. And then, yeah, on Facebook, it's also Girls Rock Louisville. You can also go to our website to see updates, and there are different links on there. Yeah, you should definitely follow us because we share all kinds of cool stuff. So, yeah.
Totally. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for, giving us some of your time today. I really appreciate it. I know from, reading your reading your little bio there on the intro, you're busy. You're a busy person. So I very much appreciate it. And we really appreciate and value everything that, your organization is doing and, bringing to our community. Because like I said, the fact that you are not just about teaching people how to play instruments, you recognize the special place and the power, maybe that's not the right word, that that the power you hold, the opportunity, I guess is probably a better word, that you have to really help, help these kids shape themselves, grow and as people. It's amazing. It's awesome. So very much appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time today.
For sure. And thank you for having me and for thinking of us. I hope that anyone who tuned in or who is watching this afterwards enjoyed this conversation. So I appreciate it.
For sure. And we will have this up on our YouTube page probably this weekend. So you all are welcome to share it and spread it far and wide. Spread the word.
Great.
So, thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.